The Collector and Belos are two different sides of the Owl House's conception of villainy and antagonism. Belos is actively malevolent. He is cruel. He is bigoted. He is willing to launch a centuries-long campaign to eliminate witches because of his resentment. Resentment that was amplified, we must acknowledge, by his brother falling in love with a witch and tearing apart their brotherly witch-hunting expeditions. He, unlike Luce, refuses to adapt to the new world that he's in. Luce has overblown expectations about the world, very idealized and sentimental, but as soon as she comes to understand what the world is like, she adapts to the world and makes new friends and gradually becomes part of the social fabric of this strange and mysterious realm. There are problems in this adaptation. It does not occur perfectly, but she ultimately becomes a wiser and more mature person while helping to benefit not just herself, but the other people she comes into contact with. Belos has the opposite experience when he enters into the demon realm at a younger age. He is initially so possessed with furor and embittered rage at this world. He has the prejudices of his society and he follows them blindly. But this is not something that inevitably leads to a centuries-long campaign of genocide. His brother is a perfect example of why Belos' expeditions to murder all witches were not teleologically determined. Philip begins, it's implied, with many of the same prejudices and biases of Belos, but like Luce, he is willing to adapt to the world that he lives in. He understands its people, its customs, and its magical hidden intricacies. He comes to love the world and to love the communities he finds himself in. And his falling in love with a witch is the apotheosis of this. Belos is left alone and isolated precisely because he cannot bring himself to accept the new possibilities for connection and relationality that exist in this world. These new ideas of bonds and friendships and possibly even romances that present themselves. Instead, he lingers in rage and rancor. And so we hate him, and perhaps we should. The Collector is a very different model of villainy and destruction, and we perceive him differently. He is anarchic. He is childlike. He appears to have no real rules, no real values, no real convictions, other than to satisfy his own momentary caprices. He is the diametric opposite to Belos' centuries-long ambitions to dominate this world, steadily maneuvering himself into political power simply so that he can make one grandiose strike against magic and against witches and against all the magical inhabitants of this realm. The Collector does not care about any of that. He is uncaring, but not maliciously so. He is rather heartless, but this heartlessness is more a result of ignorance and solipsism than it is a result of willful malice. Is it correct that we perceive these two different threats to the peace and stability of this world so differently? Is there a difference between causing destruction intentionally and coldly, and causing it as a result of mere playful caprice? Does intention matter? That's an interesting question. Aristotle would say that yes, it does. Virtue is, for Aristotle, the combination of right beliefs, right values with right action. If there are correct beliefs and correct ideals, then thoughtful action should inevitably follow from that. Otherwise, the beliefs, for Aristotle, are not properly and sincerely held. If a person, conversely, does a good action for a bad and malicious reason, think of, say, the end of Taxi Driver, then that does not count. It does not register as a moral good because the action, while moral itself, is not done for a moral reason. There are these two realms for Aristotle, the realm of personality, the realm of the self, mind, reason, and the realm of action and experience, and for Aristotle these two need to be aligned. The same framework, the same sense of moral values, and the connection between values and action can be applied to vice. An action that is intentionally done according to an ideal system that is gruesome and brutal and anti-humanist is wrong on multiple levels, whereas gruesome and destructive actions that are simply done as a result of passion, as a result of simple momentary caprice, are wrong on the realm of action, and because they are done without proper thinking, without proper reasoning and consideration. Is one worse than the other for Aristotle? I don't think he would say so. Aristotle is very vehement in his emphasis on reason. Humanity is, for Aristotle, defined as creatures with the ability to reason. That is what makes humanity special and allows us to live in political life, not necessarily running for office, but participating in a shared society, a polis together. Not reasoning through one's actions, not exercising such reason, and simply allowing oneself to be ruled by momentary passions is, for Aristotle, a vice, just as acting in accordance with a corrupt value system is a vice. Now, think about the collector as a child, which is how the show codes him. That is how he acts. He is always talking about others playing with him. Play is his ultimate source of wonder and enrichment. That is what he values above all else, because he is a child, because he has no deeper convictions above that of simply following whatever passion occurs to him at the moment. He has the hyper-individualism of a child, not really being concerned with others. For Aristotle, this is why parents need to exert a sort of authority over their children, because children do not have the capacity to exercise right reason, and so they need others to exercise that reason for them until they are old enough to develop the capacities to participate in civic life and be full adult, developed citizens of a sophisticated polis, a sophisticated civic space. The Owl House, I would say, is a little more generous toward the collector than Aristotle would be. The Owl House is a show that constantly emphasizes change and transformation and the building of substantial familial connections. Family is good for the Owl House, of course, but not innately. Certain kinds of family connections, such as that between Amity and her mom, are corrosive and detrimental to the well-being of the child. Other familial connections, like that between Luce and her mom, are basically moral and compassionate, but Luce and her mom are kept apart by layers of disconnect, by layers of confusion and misunderstanding on Luce's part. She completely misunderstands what her mom wants from her, to the point that her memory distorts the words that Camilla says to her during season 2 when she's reflecting on those words in Yesterday's Lie. The words that Camilla said to her in Yesterday's Lie, Luce assumes that Camilla desperately wants Luce to come back to her on Earth and leave behind the Boiling Isles at all costs. But that is not Camilla's viewpoint. That is not Camilla's belief system, which Camilla actively demonstrates to Luce in early season 3, when Camilla actively encourages a skeptical Luce to go to the Boiling Isles and even eventually comes with her. Family can also be formed in unexpected places, such as the central familial bond between Luce, King, and Ida. That sense of absolute commitment to another, the complete devotion to the good of the other, and the belief that the other is as devoted to you, that the Owl House views as being essential to family, can be formed in unexpected places, and perhaps it can be formed with the Collector, who is lonely and isolated. The Owl House has a lot of sympathy for lonely and isolated people, less so for Belos, who, as we see, consistently chose to be lonely and isolated and rejected the opportunity to form closer connections with others, but for those who are rather immature and capricious, like the Collector, who have not actively chosen against these solid, life-giving forms of relationality. The Owl House is kinder toward these kinds of people. Think of how it treats Hunter. It is generous toward Hunter. It is willing to allow Hunter time and space to eventually realize that he needs these kinds of close familial connections offered by first Luce and then Camilla and the others back on Earth. I think the Collector might be able to be included in that familial dynamic, if not necessarily in an expected way. That would fit the general value system of the Owl House. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching the Owl House. It is a daring and thoughtful show that deserves all the attention it's gotten, and even more. I'm really interested to see what the show does in building up the dynamic between Luce, King, and the Collector in the last 2 episodes. That could be quite artistically enriching. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.